Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. From directors, producers, writers, cinematographers, and of course, costume designers. Designing Hollywood covers some of the most celebrated professionals in the motion picture industry. The show explores the artistry, the craftsmanship, and the stories that bring our favorite motion pictures to life.
Hi, I'm Gilbert Musali, the new president and CEO of Western Costume, welcoming Designing Hollywood back to Western. This is our men's tailor shop, where we're custom making clothes all the time, alterations. This is our women's custom made. We can make anything you guys need us to make, alter anything. We can deck out a full army if you want in our military department. Thank you, Designing Hollywood, for coming in to see Western Costume. Hope to see you soon.
From the bustling streets of Manchester to the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, Neville Page's journey in the world of design and film is nothing short of remarkable. Born in the heart of England and raised amidst the cultural tapestries of Manchester and Chicago, Page's early inspirations were drawn from the realms of science fiction and the transformative art of makeup, notably Rick Baker's groundbreaking and Academy Award-winning work in An American Werewolf in London. Venturing into Hollywood at the tender age of 17, Page dabbled in acting before realizing his true calling lay in the world of design. His academic pursuits led him to the prestigious Art Center College of Design, where he not only graduated with honors, but also laid the foundation for his future endeavors in design consulting alongside Scott Robertson. Page's illustrious career boasts his role as a concept designer for cinematic works such as Super 8, Watchmen, Star Trek, Tron Legacy, Cloverfield, and the visually stunning Avatar. His unparalleled ability to craft creatures that resonate with audiences is evident in the words of Cloverfield director Matt Reeves, who lauded Page's evolutionary and biological approach to creature design, referring to his workspace as the Wall of Terror. For me personally, I love kaiju movies, and I think Cloverfield's monster was one of the coolest ever put on film. Beyond his contributions to film, Page's works have been celebrated in exhibitions like From Page to Screen, Character and Creature Design of Neville Page, and The Beauty and the Beast, Crafting Creatures by Neville Page at the Oceanside Museum of Art. These exhibitions not only showcased his diverse range of works, but also aimed to enlighten the public about the intricate gears involved in filmmaking. In the ever-evolving world of film and design, Neville Page stands as a beacon of innovation, creativity, and unparalleled artistry. Please welcome Mr. Neville Page to the Designing Hollywood Show. Neville, it's great to meet you, sir.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. It's quite the intro.
Well, for me personally, as I told you earlier, there's a lot of things that you've worked on that I particularly love, and I even own a lot of books that have your designs and, of course, the movies that you've worked on. But the thing we like to sort of delve into is when I've talked to costume designers or production designers, the roads people took to get into the industry are they're varied. Some people went the academic route. Some people were dressing their dolls as kids and then went into theater. Now, you went to the Art Center, which is an incredibly prestigious place. My girlfriend graduated from there. And I'm wondering, were you interested in design work since you were a kid? And what was the circuitous route you took to get into the entertainment business?
Well, I have always been around entertainment. My dad is a classic musician, classical in regard to analog. He's a drummer, percussionist. And my mom, that's how they met, actually was in the theater in the UK. My mom was a dancer and a performer. So I was surrounded by performers. And it was kind of a normal, which isn't normal, experience. And the pivotal moment really was Star Wars when it came out in 77.
Yeah.
But I was already primed, if you will. to want to design stuff. And I was making things and, finding objects and gluing them together, juxtaposing, rubbish into something.
Right. Were
fact,
you in the UK at this time?
No, I moved from the UK when I was 5, so I was pretty young. So kindergarten happened in Chicago, and at a very young age, I've never shared this story, but it's relevant to what my parents had to embrace in terms of that's interesting. I remember it was around 1974, give or take, and it was around Thanksgiving, just beforehand. So a lot of turkeys were being made, and I was asking my parents to ask their friends to give us their turkey carcasses, which is not a normal ask.
No.
And what I was doing, which felt normal to me, was my love of dinosaurs and going to the Field Museum in Chicago. I was gathering enough bones to create a dinosaur from chicken bones.
Wow.
And so my very kind of first project was, and I'll try and get a picture for you at some point, because my mom still has this dinosaur, which is a Dimetrodon. And that's kind of the quadrupedal, fin-sailed
Sure.
dinosaur. And I made it out of chicken bones. And again, for me, it was out of necessity, dare I say. I didn't have the money, didn't have the wherewithal to get dinosaur skeletons. So I thought, well, I'll make my own. And it was kind of the way I operated and the way my father and mom operated too. Is we didn't have a ton of money. We had no money, in fact. And if we wanted a thing, we would make it.
Right.
And that was the same way with my dad and I during Halloween. I loved Planet of the Apes, the original. And we made a Planet of the Apes costume. And then, to my dad's chagrin, Jaws came out. And I wanted to be a great white shark. Makes sense. And we made a paper mache, 9-foot-long paper mache great white shark.
Did they let you see Jaws?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you were old enough to see it.
No.
Oh.
I was not. And I still, as an adult, if I'm pulling the plug on a bath, there's a moment where I think this seems a little risky. So I'm still carrying that trauma, generational trauma. That's mine. Jaws. But that all led to the acceptability of wanting to be in the arts. And so I moved to California to be an actor because I saw Star Wars and thought, whatever that was I just witnessed on screen, I want to be a part of in some way. And I thought the only way you can do that is if you're an actor and you get to be Mark Hamill pretending to be Luke Skywalker. So literally I thought, I guess I'll be an actor. That'll be cool because at some point I'll wear that costume and be on set. And clearly I was mistaken in terms of the way to get in. But I loved being behind the camera. I loved what was happening behind the camera. I did go to acting school, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. The experience I use to this day, and I'll explain that possibly later in terms of how studying proper acting has applied itself to having another tool as a creature designer, as a concept designer. But what was kind of interesting was, and I've only just recently, this past few years, heard Steven Spielberg tell the exact same story that I'm going to tell you, which I'm sure you've heard it, and that is sneaking onto the backlot at Universal Studios.
Yeah, sure.
And at age 15, I was tall. I was 6'2" at around 15 or 16. I must have been 16 because I drove from San Diego up to LA to go to Universal Studios. And different time. But I was dressed, I had a blazer, and I had a determination and a look about myself. And I just walked on, waved at the security guard. I made it a point that I would be the one waving first. So he would be confused as to, I guess that must be another producer or something. And I just walked down and I spent all day from 7 a.m. until sundown, just going in and out of sets, walking through the props departments. I was very good. I didn't do anything destructive. I wasn't trying to steal. I was trying to steal information. I was just trying to sponge all of this. And oh my God, some of the greatest memories. And I did that for several years. It wasn't a one-time thing. I did it all the way. God, I think I saw Tom Cruise when he was filming The Last Samurai. So I was doing it for quite a while. But yeah, that sort of Star Wars being on set illegally were the two things that really planted the seed of I got to be in this industry. So that's when I went to the art center after having looked at making of art books and saw that there was a few artists that went to art center, Ralph McQuarrie being one of them.
Plus it was I went there. I didn't go to the school, but I had gone there when I first moved here with friends, and I was thinking about applying there because I went to USC, but it was more commercial and industrial art center then. But the work that was coming out of there was extraordinary.
The gallery, and it still is the same case. You walk up to the main campus and you go into the gallery, and it's so inspiring.
Oh,
I had no idea what industrial design was. I just walked up to the campus, went into that gallery and thought, these are models of future vehicles and models of future props and models of future products and packaging. I thought, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm doing it. And I was very lucky. I created the portfolio, which just recently I found in storage. It's beyond a giant slice of humble pie. It's awful. But it got me in, and it got me a half tuition scholarship, and there was no other way I was going to be able to afford it. But
that's impressive.
It kind of is, but it's more impressive in that how the hell did that even happen?
Well, you did it. You did it.
I did it. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. A lot of people, these kinds of stories, when you come to LA, especially, it was a certain time period. I moved here in 88 and I was going to school. And then in 89, I was the art department production assistant on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Oh, fantastic.
And I think I learned more in that summer working on that low budget New Line movie than I could ever possibly have learned in school.
And I think that's still very relevant today.
Yeah.
I learned a lot in school, nothing that really pertained to film because I was an educated industrial designer, product specifically. So nothing I was doing other than drawing skills lent itself to making movies. And then it was just, as you say, if that's what you want to do, and then you find yourself in it on set, fish out of water, sink or swim.
Yes, that's what it was.
Always is. That's the best way to learn it.
I was being tested from day one, and after day one, Mick Strawn, the production designer, said, "Okay, you can." They handed me $10,000 on a list, and they said, "Don't come back here until you have everything on that list." And they didn't say where to go. They didn't say where any of this stuff was. And it was great. And I came back with everything, and Mick Strawn said, "Great, you can come back tomorrow."
That's great.
That was my first day. But I don't know if people would get away with that today, but it certainly was helpful for me. But now, how did you, wanting to get into the business and having the education you had, how did you eventually get your first job working on a film?
The series of events were basically this. Graduated from Art Center. Scott Robertson, my roommate during the course of being at Art Center, he and I decided, just out of convenience and serendipity and a variety of other things, to start a consulting firm in San Francisco. And the reason San Francisco versus Pasadena is because we both had done internships up in the Bay Area. So it made sense. We went up there, did our thing, loved it, and then we had an opportunity to both of us, to teach in Switzerland at the Art Center campus, sister
Wow.
campus that was in Vevey.
When you
Another
were up in
incredible-
San Francisco, did you ever try and apply to ILM?
Yes, in fact, one of the first things that I was I wasn't trying to apply there as an individual. We were trying to, as our consulting firm, get work that they would farm out to vendors.
Right.
And again, it was ignorance. We were trying to figure out what to do, and it was
Sure.
a different time. It was 1990. So I had heard through friends that were working there that they were doing a pitch piece for a circus in space. And I immediately did some rough sketches. What's ironic is just over my computers, I've got those original sketches from that moment. And I did a sculpture, and I was never trained as a sculptor. I just, again, it's like, okay, that's what I need to be able to do to communicate.
Sure.
Get some clay, put it on a rod, and hope for the best. And I did that sculpt, and my mom, she's been very supportive. So is my father. But she has that original sculpt from that
Wow.
ILM pitch, which I didn't get. But that was kind of a step towards the potential. But we
Sure.
were designing medical products, wheelchairs, oxygen therapy, incubators, walkers, not very exciting products, but very important products. And I still struggle to this day with sometimes when I lament and I'm totally focused on working on a creature in a film, and I find myself either having worked incredibly long hours or stress about it, I think, but it's a creature, Neville. It's a made up thing. How important is that? Is it worth the stress you're giving yourself versus I'm designing a wheelchair that's going to really impact somebody's livelihood. It's going to change their ability to have mobility. And although those products were not like a movie, it certainly wasn't like Avatar, irony in just a moment, but they were really important products, and it felt good to be doing those. And the irony I was alluding to, the wheelchair that's in Avatar was one of our very first wheelchair designs that Scott and I had worked on, modified for Jim and for the film.
Which is great because you see a lot more of it in the extended version that they eventually released. So, which is very, very cool. And it gets thrown at him. Gets thrown at Jake Sully out of the bar.
Yeah, which, I was quite nervous about that shot because it's like, it's a prop still. We didn't use our physical chair that we had designed to be strong enough.
So then you went to Switzerland?
Went to Switzerland, taught there for a couple of years, came back to LA. So we didn't go back to San Francisco, came back to LA, got a studio together, and I was wanting to work in film, but at this point I had there was no social network that I had in Los Angeles. So it was all a fresh start. But two things happened. One of which was I was doing some consulting work with a friend at Rhythm and Hues. And my first job, my first major motion picture was Garfield. Specifically, Garfield's teeth. That was the bone thrown to me. It's like, hey, we need you to do some teeth because you know how to sculpt. I had one sculpt, that one for ILM. And so I was like, yeah, I'm your man. But it was great because that's where I was just sort of a sponge looking around at other artists who were like really established artists who've been doing it for years. A guy named Jim Cagle, his work was around. You know Jim?
Yeah, I used to be a PA at Tony Gardner's Altarian Studios back in the early 90s, and that's where I met all those guys. Yeah, he was an incredibly talented guy.
He's very, very talented. And I met a guy named Dylan Cole there as well. And Dylan has now become partnered with Jim Cameron on the Avatar sequels. Ben Proctor and Dylan Cole are joint production designers on Avatar 2, 3, and up to 50, however many I'm going to make. So not that had any impact on my getting involved with Avatar, but I met Dylan Cole there and we became friendly, and it was great that we met one another again on Avatar. But the first real film job. It's almost too long of a story. I could burn this entire time just on this one moment. But basically, I was given the opportunity, because of my wheelchair design experience, to design the vehicle for Men in Black: The Ride.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, Men in Black: The Ride, that means there's aliens. Is there any way you could give me an opportunity to design some of the aliens? And they thought, okay, sounds like it'd be fun for you, but that's not your portfolio, Neville. So they let me play around, and I was given the opportunities to start designing a lot of the creatures for the ride. But they said, if you're going to take this on, all of it, actually most of it, you're going to need help. So can we suggest a few people that you hire and you staff up? Because you're doing the vehicle.
Right.
There's a ton to do with the vehicle. You're doing all the guns. There was a lot. It was a huge project. So they said, okay, we're going to suggest to you one of the guys who worked on the movie. And that was a guy named Carlos Huante. So Carlos came into our studio and he worked there. I didn't know him at all. I just knew of Men in Black, the movie. And he had a pad of paper and a pencil, and he was able to sculpt. And I'm watching this guy, and it was an epiphany and a jarring and a very concerning moment in my career, because it's like, oh my God, this is a really, really talented guy. And he still is. I consider him one of the best out there as creature design goes. And so Carlos said, hey, if you want, there's another guy, a friend of mine, who's a really good sculptor too, named Jose Fernandez. I'm like, okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So I started staffing up. So I got Carlos, Jose Fernandez, and then another guy named Brian Wade, another guy named Jordu Shell, Jim Cagle, a guy named Rob Freitas, who was mold making, which is a very specific talent, but just as critical. I'm forgetting a couple names. I apologize, but those are kind of like the key guys in my studio. Now, I didn't know at the time that these were the best of the best of the best. I can quote a line from Men in Black. They were just really, really talented guys. Because again, I didn't know Los Angeles and the people working in LA. It wasn't until like a year later that it turns out I had the A team. I had the A list.
You certainly did.
I did, and those were my teachers, unbeknownst to them. So I learned from Cagle, from Wade, from Jordu, all these super talents, and to this day I'm incredibly grateful for what happened to me. But the irony of what happened was one of the guys said, "Hey, I'm going to go have lunch with a friend who happens to be working a couple doors down from you." They had lunch. He came back, or he was gone somewhere else, and I got a knock on the door. And it's this woman who said, "Hey, I believe that these are Jose's keys. He left them in my place." And she's kind of looking around at my studio. Scott's in my studio. And she's like, "You guys design bikes and helmets and stuff." So yeah, we're product designers. She said, "Oh, would you be interested in helping out with this costume, namely these helmets? Because we need somebody who can design and make these really cool science fiction helmets." I was like, "Sure, no problem. That's what we do. We know helmets." And she said, "Okay, it's a film called Minority Report, and my name's Colleen Atwood. Nice to meet you. Don't know who you are. Nice to meet you. Don't know what Minority Report is, etc."
Did you not know who Colleen Atwood was?
No.
She's been on this show.
Oh yeah, she was just a lovely woman that was returning Jose's keys. So, and it's kind of classic of my ignorance to the community in Hollywood. I wanted to be in it. I should have done a little homework.
But it probably worked for you. People probably thought that was pretty endearing.
Well, potentially, or I'm daft, one of the two. Or
because they saw you as a professional, like you're designing helmets and stuff, and Colleen Atwood comes to you, and if you were already making props, she might not have asked you that question, like, "Oh, you guys are real designers. You make real world stuff that works."
Well, and granted, there is a difference between a prop helmet and a helmet that passes ANSI standards and safety standards, etc. But yeah, from that, I was then introduced to the prop master from Minority Report, And he said, wow, you guys do bikes as well. We got a bunch of bikes. Oh, we need a wheelchair. Oh, we need gloves. It was just all this stuff thrown at us. It's like, bring it on. So what we were bringing to the table, and this still applies to creature design stuff, and probably the reason I worked with Jim on Avatar, was my industrial design propensities and education were being applied to all these things that were typically I was going to say just, that's an offensive design ask. They were just props. They were things that an art department typically don't have to stress about in terms of the safety issues of a real product.
Sure.
Now that's good because it means they're liberated to not have to worry about those things. But the upside of somebody like myself coming in is I'm thinking it through. I'm trying to invent a product, and that includes creatures. I'm trying to come up with features and functions and things that will work, and a marketable edge to a creature. So I'm thinking about it in a whole different way. And I'm not trying to be different. I'm not trying to be counter to the rest of the art department. I'm just trying to provide a service that I've been hired to do.
Sure, but like with the Minority Report, I would imagine that if you start to design the future police or the pre-crime division of in that film, your ability to create real things probably lent credibility to the things that you were creating for the film. Because you were just giving it an extra sheen of reality because of your background that a designer who'd only worked on film might not be able to have done, but you're just imbuing those things, I would imagine, with the knowledge that you had that other people didn't.
It is true, and I don't want to come across as better than or arrogant.
No, but it was just a different skill set that you had.
Different skill set. And one of the other designers doing vehicles, Harold Belker, he was also an Art Center alum, automotive. So he was bringing his expertise and his experience of designing automobiles. But the interesting thing is what we were also bringing to the table, which is almost more relevant, was a process of making props that was very different. When you see a prop in person, you're looking at it going, wow, it's certainly a lot rougher than I remember it being in the film. Well, as a product designer or an automotive designer, when you're making your prototypes, they have to look and oftentimes function as if it's the real thing under close scrutiny. So the helmets that we were going to provide on Minority Report were using all sorts of techniques that you'd use in show cars, like multi-million-dollar show cars. So if there was a glass visor, which the Minority Report helmets had these glass visors, it was going to be a special process that was done for lenses on automobiles that you typically don't do in a prop. It's a vacuum formed thing, and it gets the job done. But ironically, and I'm going to move around here a little bit, we didn't get the helmet stuff for Minority Report. They went a different direction. I was like, oh, so ready to do some cool things, because we had just finished Nike's hockey helmet as a designer, and that was like a very real product. So cut to years later, there's an opportunity to work on Tron Legacy. And I thought, I think I can apply all that stuff to the Tron world now, because that's what it needs. The camera's going to be on this stuff. It's going to be super tight. So I convinced the producers to let me do the Art Center product manufacturing thing, prototyping thing, and do it a whole new way compared to the props at the time were being done. And they gave me carte blanche to do it that way. And what was kind of interesting was I used, if you recall, Tron's helmet, the original Tron. Yeah. That was an old hockey helmet.
Yep.
That they just put some tape on.
Some Chart Pack tape.
Yep, exactly. What I did was I used our Nike hockey helmet as a foundation and inspiration, thinking it makes sense. That was a futuristic helmet that we were doing for Nike. So I used that as my basis for a new hockey helmet. It was sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it made sense, and did a really cool glass-like visor that was more hockey injection molded in its intention. And then there you go. We got the helmets in Tron.
Amazing. Now I got to go back.
Yep.
You're working on Minority Report.
Yes.
That kid that wanted to be a great white shark for Halloween or whatever back in 1975, you are now working on a movie directed by the man who directed Jaws.
Yeah.
Now, what was it like? Did you ever stop and kick yourself? Like, I can't believe, like, did you have a geek out moment where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm working on this movie. I am working for Steven Spielberg.
You know, I'm kicking myself now. I'm convinced I'm an idiot. It never occurred to me to bring that to his attention, that I was inspired. So
you're a true professional. You are not a geek like us.
Well, you know, I am, but I got to keep it contained.
I try. I can't do it.
I don't blame you. I don't like that I am able to. But, you know, what's really fascinating about how things are connected. And again, this is another very long story, and I'll give you the massively truncated version. So when I moved out to California from Chicago to become an actor, I'm in Chicago, and I audition for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and I'm fortunate to get accepted. So now I'm going to move out. Before I move out, though, I need some money. There's a new hotel by the O'Hare Airport called the Westin Hotel O'Hare, and they're brand new. They're not even finished building the penthouse and presidential suites and all that. So what that means is they're giving out rooms practically for free. So they know that I'm going to be there for just a period of time and then moving to California to be an actor. And they get a crew coming in that are going to film a movie in Chicago. And they said, hey, Neville, you want to be an actor? Why don't you take care of this entire crew? You can sort of be their concierge, their point person. And I was like, oh, great, that'd be fun. And I'll get to meet some people from Hollywood. And so it was the producers and the crew that was going to do set design and set dressing and all that kind of thing. And I was learning about this from them.
Sure.
Because I became friendly with them. We'd go out for beers after both of our works, and we'd hang out, and I'd listen to these guys who were grips and you know, building stuff. And I thought, oh my God, just tell me more about 2x4s. This is amazing. And man, I was loving it. And the producer, one of the main producers, she and I became friendly, and I was taking care of her and whatever she needed. And then the cast shows up, because now they built their sets and they're ready to film. So now I'm taking care of the entire cast. Whatever they need, Neville, you take care of it. And there was this one guy who said, and this is going to date me, he said, I'm going to be receiving some phone calls when I'm on set. Can you take all the messages? I was like, absolutely. So I became sort of his secretary, his switchboard operator. And so I'd get these calls from this guy, and I would take the message, Tom, 5 p.m., and then I would hand these messages over. After a day's shoot, he'd come up to me saying, any messages? Yes, Tom called. He wants to know if, and blah, blah, blah. He says, okay, next time he calls, can you tell him? So I was communicating this information back and forth. And cut to, they're done filming. The movie is The Breakfast Club. Emilio Estevez is the guy that needs these messages from Tom. And he at one point said to me, do you know who the Tom is that I'm getting the messages from? I said, no, obviously. He says, oh, it's Tom Cruise. I was like, oh, the guy from Taps and Risky Business. Oh, how cool. So the movie's done. They go out. They're back in L.A. and I'm going to move to L.A. The producer gave me her phone number, and she said, call me when you're in L.A. And it wasn't because, you know, if you want to be an actor, I'll hook you up. It was more just give me a call. Give her a call.
Well, you competently took care of people that worked on a crew on a shoot so you proved your mettle.
I did, and again, I wasn't trying to earn points. My attitude always, whatever the job is, I'm going to do the best at it. If I'm managing,
and she saw that. That's the number one rule in Hollywood. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you do it the best you can, people notice that. So,
yep. Yeah. And so she invited me out, and she extended the invitation so far as to say, hey, come to set. We're done filming Breakfast Club, and you know what? We're going to invite you to cast and crew so you can see the screening. I was like, oh, cool. But come out to set, and I'm going to just have you kind of hang out with me for a bit, but then you could just stay on set and watch him film this one movie, because Michael Anthony Hall is also in it. It's called Weird Science. I was like, oh, that'd be neat. And so I'm on set of Weird Science watching that happen. And Michael Anthony Hall remembered me, and, I'm chatty with him. And then I go to the cast and crew of Breakfast Club. And I'm not telling as truncated a version as I should be, but basically getting to hang out with this group, that's my introduction to Hollywood.
Right.
So it's a very, very unique experience to begin with.
And you became one of them. You were no longer, but I mean, you're helping people out. That's what the crew does. You're part of the crew.
Well, and you know what it didn't do this, but it galvanized and bolstered a particular attitude I have with working with celebrities and names. And that is, you are all doing your job in the same way I'm doing mine.
Yep.
Yeah, I know you're a star, but I'm not going to treat you any different, which, to my point with Steven Spielberg, was that right. When I met him sort of kind of face nose to nose. Actually, it was calipers to eyeballs. It was that close because we were doing a sculpture of him for Men in Black: The Ride. But when I had the opportunity to work pretty close with him, which was because of Men in Black: The Ride, by the way, it was, try not to wet your pants, Neville, because this is incredible. You're sitting across from Steven, not at a distance.
So you did geek out.
Oh, I was geeking out.
In your mind, yeah.
In my mind and in my soul. And it was worse than that. Way worse than that, because I was the fourth person in the room. So it's Steven and the two main guys who were in charge of the Men in Black: The Ride, and me tagging along because I had a few sculptures and drawings, and it sort of made sense I was going to be there. So Steven was talking to these two other guys, David Cobb and Phil Hedema. And, he was gracious, and you recognized me in the room. It wasn't like I was just a fly on the wall. But he was talking about, I was just up north in San Francisco, San Rafael, and I was talking to George about his new movie that he's working on. I'm like, George? Is he talking about that George? And he was. And he was talking about Star Wars, and it was being shot digitally. And so I'm hearing this candid conversation about a movie that is not yet done, but I'm way behind. I'm in Steven Spielberg's office listening to this conversation. It was one of those moments like, oh my God, this is kind of unbelievable. And cut to years later, I'm sitting with Steven and J.J. Abrams talking about Super 8 post Cloverfield. We're talking about that film and what the creature is going to be. And Steven's working on Tintin next door. And I remember when Steven was going back in and out of shooting Tintin, he went in, and I'm looking at JJ, and it's like, can you believe that this is happening? I said, I can't believe. No, JJ said to me, I can't believe we're sitting here with Steven Spielberg. I said, JJ, I'm not over sitting with you, quite frankly, because JJ to me is a Steven Spielberg, and he still is, more so now than ever. So, if I was to sum up that story, because there's a whole Tom Cruise connection.
Sure.
Meeting him with JJ and how when I first was having this conversation with Tom, I said, I don't know if you're going to remember this, Tom. And again, I'm treating Tom like a normal human being. One should. Although he's not a normal human being, he's exceptional in so many ways. I think we know that. You just watch his movies and what he does. But I said to him, do you recall years ago calling up a hotel to talk to Emilio Estevez. You were filming Legend. And he's looking at me like, this kid's done his research kind of thing. He's like, yeah. I said, I was the guy on the other end of the line. I was taking your messages. He's like, what? And it was, again, it's one of, like you just said, there's a different connection that you have when you're part of the crew. And I'm very fortunate to have been invited in. But what all of this sums up to, or equates to, is when you're genuine in Hollywood, people kind of notice it.
Yeah.
When you treat people as they should be treated, like normal human beings, it also is noticed in a good and a favorable way. And if you're genuinely good to people throughout your life, which I hope we all are or aspire to, then good things kind of happen when you run into them again. But if you were not so nice in your past, well, that will haunt you as well. So I'm not saying that, here's the cautionary tale of be a good Samaritan. It's just, be whoever you are.
No, I had one, when you were talking about Tom Cruise being extraordinary, I agree. A friend of mine directed a movie that he's in, and I ended up going to a screening to watch this movie that he went to as well, and we both showed up an hour early. They changed the time by an hour, so I was in a room with Tom Cruise, just him and I. I had my girlfriend at the time and my buddy, and I figured, well, no one's here, so and since I was there, Tom Cruise figured, I must be here for a reason. Yeah. And I explained who I was, and I said, listen, man, can I ask you a question? And he was looking at me, and I said, well, I was a huge Tom Cruise fan, and this is 2009.
Okay.
And so I said to him, I'm just curious, you've worked with so many great directors and you've worked with such great material. Do you focus first on, is it your collaborator that you're going to work with? Or is it the material that draws you to the project first? Or maybe it's a combination of both. That's all I had to say. He stopped and, he's got that laser focus.
Yeah.
And he was like, no one's asked me that question before. And we talked for an hour waiting for, and the entire time, and he was so present, and because the first thing I asked him was about Risky Business and Paul Brickman. And we started talking about why Paul Brickman didn't make another movie after Men Don't Leave. And I was blown away about how much he actually knows. He knows a lot. He's a very impressive guy. And all I did was he was curious about how did I just know extemporaneously about all the movies he'd been in. And I tried to explain why I'm a documentarian, and it was Bryan Singer who made Valkyrie. And so I've done 4 documentaries with Bryan, and that's why I knew all this stuff. But it's funny, people started to filter in, and they just stood around us as we continued the conversation.
Yeah.
I've never spoken to him. I never spoke to him after that, but I can't imagine if I reminded him of that conversation, he might remember it. But he and there's a handful of others are pretty unique individuals. I believe that he would. Yeah, he's that kind of guy.
He is. Steven Spielberg is very much the same. I was shocked that he remembered so much. And that's not to say that, I expected him to have a terrible memory. It's just like, I'm one of thousands and thousands of people that come through his life, and I'm not necessarily significant. And that's not to be self-deprecating. It's just I recognize where I am in the machine. And he remembered a lot. So, and to me, and it's not just the memory, it's their approach. So
100%.
For me, working with a JJ, a Tom Cruise, a Steven Spielberg, I've been very fortunate, quite frankly.
Yeah.
The majority of the people I've worked with, they're good people. And my aspirations of writing, directing, producing is modeled around the integrity of these individuals.
Well, that's one of the things that I think people, especially in this day and age, you coastal elites, you Hollywood people, they don't understand that the people, like, especially in production, I love people in production because they're so focused on the work and what, they're not out partying on the weekends. They're in their edit bays, and figuring that kind of stuff out. Now, for you, one of the things I love you sharing all this because I think it's pertinent to the industry. But then you had a really incredible run. My team was hired on Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Did you go to New Zealand?
No, I was so close.
Because we were the documentary crew that was documenting the whole production, and we were in New Zealand for 14 months.
Oh, amazing! What an experience.
It was insane. I mean,
that's back to then.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore with it, unfortunately.
No,
it was. I mean, we were told half of my team worked on Lord of the Rings, as did I, and they're like, we want to do. Disney was like, we want to do Lord of the Rings, but on Chronicles of Narnia. And I'm like, okay. So it's going to be pricey if you want to get all that footage.
Yeah.
So, but you had a great run. You worked on Narnia, Cloverfield. Did you design the creature?
Yeah.
Yeah, that creature is amazing.
Thank you.
Cloverfield really, I love the way that Cloverfield took the found footage genre and put a Hollywood sheen on it.
Yeah.
It was, what a brilliant marketing campaign. With the Slusho, is that what it was? And all that stuff. They did such a great job, and the team making that. And then you worked on Watchmen, and then of course Star Trek and Avatar. Now I got to ask you about a few of these. Watchmen's the comics, one of my favorite things in the world. I don't know if you can see on the shelf. Well, I've got some of the Watchmen over here, but what was it like? And one of my questions to you, and it also goes into Star Trek. When you work on something that existed in one format and is being translated to something else, like Star Trek, Tron, Watchmen, how close do you feel? Do you have to have a fealty to the original material? Like the Watchmen movie is almost slavishly devoted to the panel layouts of the comics. I mean,
yep.
Zack Snyder clearly has a great love for the source material. Now, when you're working on something like that, does that hamper you as a designer, or does it give? How does that work when you're working on something that has already been pre-designed in another medium and you're translating it into, like, going from a comic into a movie?
I can't speak too much to Watchmen. To be clear, my experience on Watchmen was more prop department than it was designing the look of things. So they had established not only were they taking the comic book and translating it somewhat verbatim into the film, I was then taking the film stuff that was done and creating the figurines. Myself and the guy who I worked with on Cloverfield, Tully Summers, he and I did those ZBrush sculptures and prints.
Right.
But what was sort of interesting about it was the reason I got that job is because I went to school with Zach. He and I were both at Art Center at the same time. And we worked on a couple student films together with a guy named Clay Staub. And Clay Staub did 300. He was one of the producers of 300. So it was kind of interesting how, again, it was one of those things where our relationship in the past lent itself to opportunities in the present.
That's amazing.
Time. Yeah. So I've been in touch on and off through the years with Zach. But now to answer your question as it pertains to other productions.
Well, if you want to get into Star Trek,
might as well.
We could do that.
Let's do that then.
Okay, I got to ask then, because obviously Star Trek 09, Star Trek had laid fallow since the end of Enterprise in 2005. And then when Bad Robot came, and you'd already worked for them on Cloverfield, obviously, then that worked out really, really well. You get hired to do Star Trek. Were you a Star Trek fan growing up?
Moderately. Yeah, I was.
Because my other touchstones, you already brought up, like Planet of the Apes, That was a big thing for me, too.
I was a science fiction fan. I loved, Isaac Asimov. I loved Omni magazine. Anytime I had like that $2.99 or whatever the price was back then, I would buy the latest Omni magazine because of the artwork, the cover, and all the stuff inside of it. And man,
they had that great 2010 cover.
Yep.
I think Michael Whalen painted that.
Yeah,
that was an awesome. But yeah, I loved Omni. And then, were you a Starlog and Fangoria guy?
Big time, more Starlog than Fangoria. But I got both as well. I was collecting those. I still have on my shelf here, my bookshelves, some garage sale Frank Frazetta books that were at the time, original prints, if you will. But I loved Star Trek. I loved Godzilla stuff. I loved Ultraman. All of that. I would just lap it up. And, back then you had to, if you were fortunate to have a TV guide and you could find when it was going to air, you had to make the time because it was on and off. There was no recording, no catching it again from another few years.
That was, people don't understand. Like when we nerds, or I call our group imagination connoisseurs. That's the name I call everybody. But yeah, my mom would bring home the TV guide on Wednesday nights or Wednesday after she went grocery shopping, and I would go through and you'd look at from 11 o'clock at night till 6 a.m. like what was airing, and my parents wouldn't let me stay up, and I'm like, oh, this was on TV. I put like one day I'm going to get to stay up and watch this when they rerun it or something. It was because there was no other way. And then when when we got our first VCR in 1980, the TV guide became a thing. It was like, what's on? And I'd make, I had a whole notebook that was by downstairs. I'm like, okay, I can't forget to record this. And
Yep.
It was a big, kids today, they have it so easy.
They do.
The internet. And then Starlog and Fangoria were like the only thing you could figure out from what's getting made and who's doing what.
Yeah. Yeah. And that plus...
Were you a Famous Monsters kid at all? Did you ever read Famous Monsters of Filmland?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I had, which is one of the things that I loved about Super 8, was JJ's nostalgia. And I remember being on the set, which was the kid's bedroom, and I spent a lot of time hanging out, just kind of waiting. So I had a lot of time to look around and see stuff. And I was looking in the room that's dressed. I'm like, wait a minute. I had that very same glow-in-the-dark mummy glue-together kit.
Yep.
And I had that kit, and I had this kit. And so I would say to JJ, did you see the set? He's like, yeah, I kind of know what's going on down there. And it was just so fun to like reminisce with him and then see the movie, because there was a lot of stuff I didn't see happening. And I see the movie and the testers paint, and you could smell, if you lived that stuff, you could smell those scenes.
Oh yeah, and all of it. The only objection that I had, because I was a little older, is they actually had real one sheets on the wall. Yes. Actual film, and I'd be like, "Come on, kids didn't know where to get those." We got them when I was growing up because we were a little older.
Yeah.
So but kids didn't know where to get. I was like, "You guys, come on, one sheets." That was the only thing. Everything else, I was like, "Yeah, that was great."
Okay, fair enough.
But when you get hired to work on something like Star Trek, the thing that was interesting to me is that Star Trek is in terms of its design, one of the most documented IPs ever, even more so than Star Wars. I guess Star Wars now probably is comparable, but back then, you could get books on the ships,
right? All
the art, the set design, the costumes. There's every single thing, and I think one of the appeals of Star Trek was the actual kind of continuity, the rough continuity that the shows had established from 1966 to 2005. Now, their conceit of having a new universe was a good one, because you could then go and redesign everything from the ground up and not break canon.
Right.
So what was that like when you came on? Like, you know, they didn't really show up in the finished film because that section was kind of cut out, but you had new Klingons. I mean, the Romulans, the ship designs, everything was reimagined.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you to jump in on?
Ignorance is bliss. I was just doing my job, sort of doing what I was told. I was originally brought on only to do the ice scene.
Oh, with the monster.
And it was going to only be sort of the original draft. It was a desert planet. And so I remember reading the script with the desert planet and reading that scene. And again, if you're fortunate to have the relationships that I've had, I was on different terms with JJ than normally an illustrator would be working on a film like that. And I thought that was normal. And I feel that it should be normal. But I respectfully asked JJ if he wouldn't mind me rethinking what was on the page. And the reason why I approached him about it, and I still hold on to this conceit today, with respect to the writer of any script, depending on the type of material that's been written that you're reading and designing for, I make the assumption that I've been brought in as a specialist, creature specialist. And the writer is creating not a placeholder for me to come in and design, because that's a bit rude, but they're doing the best they can when they're describing something. And you can't see it because I can't move the camera around, but my studio, I've got skeletons, animal parts, I got all sorts of stuff here. Some consider it morbid. It is not. It's more like a museum. And these are the references that I use because I like to be informed. So I'm the one that is supposed to, if you're getting your money's worth, supposed to have been steeped in the biology and have spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff. And a writer is thinking about story and character and all that.
Right.
So when I read the description of the creature that was on the desert planet, I genuinely thought, that doesn't sound like a good combination of creature elements. And so I said to JJ, do you mind if I approach this differently? He didn't really know what I had done on Avatar, because Avatar was going to be like 2 more years or 3 more years before it comes out.
But you had Cloverfield behind you, which was an incredible creature design.
Thank you. And yeah, we did have that history behind us. So to JJ's credit, he said yes. And again, I learned about collaboration, and I learned about the importance of somebody saying, yeah, go ahead, take a stab at it, see what you got. I may not use it, so be prepared for that, or I might use it, be prepared for that.
But he was open.
That's the thing. That was such a different experience compared to some previous people where, again, it wasn't because they had all the answers, but it was their baby, their dream.
Sure.
They knew what they wanted, and I was hired to help facilitate getting it out of their head. And JJ is different in that regard, where he has a vision, he's clear about it, but he allows you to propose alternatives. And again, he might just go with what he wants, and that's totally fine. And there's a wonderful education and maturity that happens with an artist like myself who's working with somebody like that, because you're allowed to participate, but you're also cognizant of the fact that what you're coming up with may never see the light of day, and that's okay too. So anyhow, he was receptive. I came up with an idea, receptive to that, and then we ended up with what you see on screen, which is Big Red as it's been referred to, and the Polarilla. And so I was kind of done with those. And then there was an opportunity to help out. I was asked to help out with, doing some pointy ear designs and taking pictures of Zachary Quinto, and then doing in Photoshop various angles of eyebrows and hair bobs.
Sure.
And then that rolled into, well, why don't we do the same for the Romulans with Eric Bana? Which then rolled into, well, why don't you then work on the Klingons? And why don't you work on... So I ended up just doing tons of stuff and working with Joel Harlow, Mindy Hall, Barney Berman. And, it was a real, again, one of those things where it's like, wow, I'm in the trenches working with the best of the best. This is really an unbelievable education. That's how history works, right? You look back and go, that's what happened?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So that's why I say ignorance is bliss. I came out of that with all these experiences that I use to this day. And I've made those precedent, the good stuff, to help convince other people who hire me that let me work closely with you. Let me work closely with the performer. I don't care that they are a major celebrity. I care that they get a chance to collaborate and talk about their comfort level of wearing makeup, contact lenses, all that stuff. So it's created a very unique position for me, and it sort of became how my career has been with the whole Star Trek television franchise.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you were doing the Romulans and doing the Klingons, did you go back and reference what had been done in the shows, the various series from the original series through Enterprise? Was that something that, or no, because you were in an alternate universe, so you were not beholden to previous designs?
You still are. You recognize.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I although I didn't say I was a super fan of Star Trek, I was a fan of Star Trek.
Right, sure.
And you recognize, well, I want to see this movie, and if I'm going to go see Star Trek, I need to be seeing Star Trek. So if we imagine that the Vulcans, instead of the point being at the top, the point could be at the bottom, because you know what? I'm a designer, and I get to do, I get to reimagine what this can be. Nah, and that's the delicate balance that I think JJ and team succeeded with. Dare I say, the odds were stacked up against that Star Trek idea working just by virtue of casting new people to play those existing roles.
Yes.
Like, there's no way you're going to get Spock. There's no way you're going to get Captain Kirk without it turning into some kind of ridiculous caricature. And
well, that was, I think, the great joy of that film was that cast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they Chris Pine was a great Kirk. Quinto was good as Spock, and of course Carl Urban nailed Dr. McCoy.
All of them.
Yeah, they were all. And even Ben Cross as Sarek, was great as well.
Yeah, and
Winona Ryder as Amanda.
She was wonderful. That girl from Avatar was in it. I forget her name. Zoe Saldana, and also there's one other. Oh, Bruce Greenwood was a great Pike. Amazing Pike. Well, all of them were perfectly cast.
And Chris Hemsworth as George Kirk.
Yeah.
And Bannon was a great Nero.
The list goes on and on, doesn't it? I mean, it really was an exceptional cast, and not just good casting, but I was fortunate to work very closely with pretty much all of them and become friendly with almost all of them. And getting to know them as people, that was a real delight, because, there are certain people in Hollywood that live up to their legacy,
right,
in ways that are not good. And then there's the entire crew of Star Trek. And that's another lesson I took away, experience I took away from having worked on that. And that is, whoever's at the helm sets the tone for the culture of that particular production. And JJ's personality of being such a good human being and such a great director, and by director, not just in terms of like directing people to perform, but how he directs a whole crew and makes you feel collaborative, makes you feel, not just makes you feel, but you are genuinely invited to be a participant in it. And every day was positive on that production, and people were smiling, and it was joyous in so many ways, even it was freaking hard and painful, and I was insecure because it was like, I gotta do right for JJ, I gotta do right for the audience. This is Star Trek, this is not Avatar we got to create canon. Star Trek is like, ooh, we gotta sustain canon.
Well, that's a whole other thing. You went from Star Trek really pretty much right into Avatar.
Vice versa.
Oh, was it vice versa? Oh, yeah, because Avatar had all the development.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Avatar.
You didn't just work your way up. You started jumping in with these. You work for Spielberg. J.J. Abrams, and of course Jim Cameron. What was it like to find yourself working on Avatar? I mean, in terms of a creature design job, they designed the ecosystem of a whole planet in that movie.
Yeah. Yep, down to the blades of grass, as Jim would say.
What was that like for you? That must have been, you must have loved that. Or not?
Yes. Well, I did. The opportunity sort of was born out of working on Men in Black. I got a taste from these other guys of what really great creature designers do. So I knew what they did. Was I as good? God, no. So I got the opportunity. There was 4 of us that were hired to work at Jim's house in Malibu. It was myself, Yuri Bartoli, Wayne Barlow, and George Ushell.
Did you ever have Barlow's book, Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials?
Did I ever? Which is how I knew of Wayne Barlow. I thought, oh my God, this guy.
Because I would have totally geeked out if I met Wayne Barlow. I would have been like, dude.
I did, and he's a wonderful guy, and it was a really, really cool experience to see how he works, and all of the other guys, their approach to design, their drawing style. I mean, Jordu was not as much a drawer as he was a sculptor, and I was kind of neither, and I was trying to figure out my way, and Wayne Barlow was not a sculptor, he was a drawer, and he's more of a concept guy too. He just comes in with these crazy ideas.
Yeah.
And so for me, where it was an uncomfortable beginning was I didn't feel that I didn't have the skills. I knew that I didn't have the skills.
Man.
It wasn't a sensation. And I was wondering, God, why am I on this film? Why did Jim hire me? And it was the classic self-doubting artist syndrome, but it was also a genuine, I'm pretty good at looking at the math and the statistics and the reality. And I'm looking at my portfolio and I'm looking at these guys and their work, and it's like, oh, I got so much catching up to do, so much. So I was first one in, last one out. Not because I was more dedicated, it's because I was more behind. And so that meant I also was living in Pasadena, driving to Malibu, so I was trying to avoid traffic. But I started buying book after book after book to become what I felt I needed to be for Jim, and that is the expert in the room of an industrial designer creating creatures. So although I was not as efficient with a pencil or clay, I was pretty darn efficient at imagining and creating and inventing. And I was potentially overcompensating because I really went deep into the world of trying to understand biology, and to the art department's dismay, I had like entire giant salmon heads in the common area for lunch, and I'm dissecting these heads in the sink with an X-Acto knife and a sharp pencil because I'm trying to understand the mechanics of a jaw and how it works. And the layers of an eyeball and how an eye works on a fish. How does it move? And
Did Cameron love that? Was he like totally into that you're doing that?
He was. Others not so much. I found a dead hummingbird outside, and I was the first one to grab it and stick it in the freezer until a later date when I could, soak it in some solvent and see its bones. Back to my
the Ed Gein of creature design.
Well, it's kind of like, I was boiling turkeys for their bones when I was 8. But it made sense. I wasn't doing it. I think my parents were concerned that there might be a little Dahmer in me. But I was doing it because I was fascinated with how limbs worked and what's that tendon pulling and why. And until you know the why of that, you can't really invent new stuff or push the boundaries. So that's where I think Jim and I really aligned. I wasn't trying to stand out at all. In fact, I try not to stand out. I like to be under the radar. As strange as that may sound, having been on Face Off and I'm okay with interviews and stuff, sure. I prefer to not be on the red carpet versus on it. But Jim saw my interest and my ability to sort of translate biology into usable functional design and how that relates to communicating to him, as well as handing over an asset to Weta. I'm not handing over a drawing. I'm handing over a completed thought that they can work with, as opposed to them having to fix a cool concept or them having to figure out how to make a cool concept work. I'm providing it as a working thing because I felt that was my job. I didn't do it because I wanted to be extra. I did it because you're paying me to do that.
Of course.
So that's how it all, and I still work to this day, is I'm a problem solver. And I will, whether it's the fish in Piranha or a multi-million dollar project like Avatar, it gets the same effort. It gets the same attention.
Of course.
And I think that's how it should always be. In the same way I treat craft services, the person who's, refilling the cashews, they get the same Neville as Steven Spielberg gets.
Sure.
There should not be a distinction.
I agree with you 100%. When you're working though with a James Cameron or a Zack Snyder or a J.J. Abrams, I mean, I would imagine that, because Jim Cameron came up, he could basically do everything. If he didn't need anyone else, I imagine that with generative AI in 5 years, Jim Cameron's last movies are just going to be him sitting at a desk using AI to generate 3-hour features. And they'll be great. He'll be the first filmmaker to totally make the first AI-generated feature that one man created, and it'll be James Cameron. And he'll probably do it sitting at the bottom of the Marianas Trench in a submersible while he's making his just to see how long he can stay down there.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think he's going to do AI stuff in that way, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, only because he really can do everything, and when you're working with him, I mean, obviously the Avatar project, you need that underpinning of understanding the biology of Pandora. Like, I do this entertainment news show, and I've been talking about how excited I am for Avatar 3 because you have these Na'vi that have forsaken Iowa. I'm always joking, they're the Mordor Na'vi that live next to the Crack of Doom where Sauron is, and they just can't wait, and your God has no dominion here. I'm like, yes, bring it on! I can't wait for that shit, but you have to have the whole planet. I mean, the whole ecosystem of Pandora squared away, and the creature design in that film is just, and they keep giving us more.
Yeah,
it's just the astonishing thing is how much stuff you guys have actually created for that film. And then you went on, like, another thing you worked on. I wanted to ask you about. You worked on Green Lantern.
Yes,
and I'm kind of I liked Green Lantern. I thought it had a tonal issue, but I love the way Oa was depicted, and the Lantern Corps, and like all the different Green Lanterns, like Kilowog, and to see everybody in, well, it was animation, but live action. That was like a dream come true for me. I've loved Green Lantern since I was a kid, and to see OA represented and to see the Green Lantern Corps represented was a lot of fun. Did you have a lot of input on that part of Green Lantern?
A pretty significant amount. It's kind of funny, the way I got that job. Actually, I'm not even sure why they called me up. But for whatever reason, I got the call. Could you come in and we'd like to talk to you about designing the creatures for Green Lantern? I was like, oh my gosh, great. And I wasn't that familiar with Green Lantern. So I did my homework and I thought, oh my goodness, these are some crazy ass ideas.
Yeah.
I kind of like it because a lot of them just, I don't even know how you're going to do it as a design. So I came in, I met with one of the producers, and I saw a ton of artwork that was done of Kilowog, of everything. And I'm looking at this, and it was all done by the Aaron Sims company. So done by Aaron Sims and his staff of incredible artists. So if you're familiar with his work, you can kind of imagine what level of design and craft these images were. And so I'm looking at it, and I asked the producer, he says, yeah, this is the stuff we want you to redesign. I'm thinking, and I asked the question, which I think kind of upset him initially. I said, this is really good stuff, though. What do you think I could possibly bring to the table that you haven't already done? Now, part of that, and my apologies if this particular producer sees this, but part of what me saying that was I wanted the job. I'd be a fool not to want the job. But at the same time, I'm like, can you Hollywood folks stop burning through money irresponsibly? That's what's going on in my head.
Well, also, if you're seeing work that you think is good, you need to understand why would you be called in to replace or recreate or change the work that's already been done? What is it about this work that needed to be changed? That's only going to help your perspective in terms of how you're going to approach your design.
Exactly, because I felt if I was a producer, if I was the production designer, I'd be like, you're done with your creature design. And I really felt that. There was some gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. So I just didn't understand. So I wanted clarity as to how can I possibly make this better? Let me know what it is you don't like about this. You're a fool to not like it because it's good. But it really, I'd had enough films under my belt to where I thought, you don't need to spend money again.
Right.
My goodness. I'll take the money and run, I guess. And so myself and Tully Summers, we've had a wonderful long relationship, being friends, but also designing together. We started off in toys, doing sculpture that rolled into Cloverfield, then Watchmen, then Avatar, Tron, and now this Green Lantern experience. And they just said, just give us your take on it. I'm like, all right, then. So I felt that what we did was good. In some cases, pretty darn good. Was it better than what they had? Very debatable. I don't think it was less than. I don't think it was better. It's totally subjective. But I loved what Aaron Sims and his team had done. I'm going to give credit to Jared Morantz and Constantine. I know they worked on it and they did some cool stuff. And when you look at my Kilowog versus theirs, it's nuanced. It really is nuanced. And to this day, the taste in my mouth of Green Lantern is different than other people's who are maybe disappointed. Like you said, the tone may not have been in alignment with what your expectation was. But for me, it was... I came in to work on the costume. I believe that's where I was initially hired, is to help with the costume design. And that was a fun thing because it meant hanging out with Ryan Reynolds in a very different way, in a different capacity.
I have to say that the concept of the Green Lantern costume in the film I thought was very cool.
Very cool.
I mean, not only did it look great, but the whole idea of the pulsing energy that you could see in it, I thought those are all great ideas that weren't necessarily right out of the comic, but they were a great extrapolation for film.
Agreed.
And it looked great.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there was a lot of good stuff in it. No question. And it was a good learning experience in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the villain, the parallax idea and the expanding head and all that was at odds with the rest of the... I mean, you had Martin Campbell who'd come off of, reinvented Bond once with GoldenEye and then again with Casino Royale.
Yeah.
I wanted to see that Green Lantern.
I know. It was a very different... It wasn't either of those films. And, Casino Royale is like, damn.
Yeah.
This is impressive. And I remember when I went to the screening of Green Lantern, I had the same thing. And I'm not saying he didn't do the right job or anyone did. It's what it is. But I just remember thinking, and that's the wrong thing to do, is to have an expectation, because expectations are the worst thing to have, because they're usually manufactured in your own mind. So then you are ripe for disappointment.
Well, but also, I mean, I think, I don't think that it was a script issue where they were going. Comic book movies were in the middle of changing anyway. The whole tone of it was. And so I can understand that, but I don't think the design department let anyone down. I mean, I loved the design of the film and it was really, really cool. And I think a lot of the people would say that a lot of the Green Lantern material was handled well. You had your goofy villain on Earth, that was that kind of, how do you work those two things? And Martin Campbell wasn't there to rewrite the script. He was hired to make. So, so I thought that's why I wanted to ask you about that, because I think there's a lot to love as far as the design elements are concerned in that movie.
Yep, I do agree.
Yeah, and then after that, you worked on Ridley Scott's Prometheus. That was another movie that had incredible... I mean, that movie, arguably, if you were to ask, what are some of the most beautiful science fiction movies ever made? Prometheus would be up there. The design work from everything in that movie has incredible... Again, script aside, everything in that film is stunning to look at.
It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing. And... you're looking at the byproduct of incredible designers and artists, and Ridley. I remember anyone who knows anything about art and how to draw and communicating ideas, the average person needs time, quiet, and the appropriate ability to just kind of like look for the design with your pencil, etc. And then you sit next to Ridley, who we're having a conversation, and he has a white piece of paper with a black Sharpie, and there was no exploring with a Sharpie.
No.
And we're having a conversation, and he's talking about something unrelated to what his hand is doing on the page, and then he'll say, this is, by the way, sorry to cut you off, it was fun talking about that movie, but this is what I'm thinking for the creature for Prometheus. You're like, oh.
And
okay.
I mean, he went to art school. He is an artist himself. He's a fine artist.
Like James Cameron in that regard is like, he can do it all as well. He knows how movies are made, and he knows how movies are designed, and he does his own storyboards. And it was really, before I got to see him do that, and I kind of knew that was part of what he does, but just the sweetness and the kindness that I experienced with him was extraordinary. And yes, I know that we have to be careful when we start putting these people on pedestals for doing normal stuff. Oh my God, so-and-so was amazing. Really? Why? They opened the door for me. Oh my God, they did that?
Right. Well, I mean, it's always interesting to me. And one of the things it sounds like you probably had the same thing. Like, if you're a fan of movies are like, they're like scripture, they're like these miraculous things that get made. And you and I are probably pretty close in age. We grew up in a time where suddenly, because we were post Jaws and Star Wars, we had these books, and we had the magazines, and they would show us, like, my first hero was George Pal, who produced War of the Worlds and Conquest of Space and When Worlds Collide. He was the first name of anybody I knew in Hollywood because I knew I liked those movies. And we were that generation where the people behind the cameras became these revered, these were people, they were our prophets in a way.
Yeah.
Like they were, and their finished works were, I mean, Blade Runner is for many people scripture. The design of that film, if you look at that film today, aside from the 4x3 screens, the film looks like it was shot. Same with Alien. It looks like it was shot today.
Oh, it's it was funny. I remember one day sitting with Ridley Scott. So it was he and I and one of his executive producers on Prometheus. And his executive producer would get annoyed with Ridley and I because we would get so off topic. We had a design job, thing to discuss, to get done, check that box and move on. And we would talk about films. And he would say, it was the scariest scene ever in a movie, Neville. And he's talking about his experience with certain movies. And I would jump in saying, oh my God, it was the scariest scene I've ever seen in a film. And as I'm starting to describe it, it's like, oh, that was Alien.
You directed it. Yes.
Yeah, you directed it. And then I'd reference something else. And it's like, oh, that was Blade Runner. Oh, okay. Oh, that was Gladiator. I was like, all right, shut up. Every film I'm like referencing as these are the greatest moments. It's like so many of them were his movies.
It's funny. He's kind of getting slammed this week because he said that so many modern movies are rubbish, but he's going back and watching more of his own films. And he's like, these are really good. He's like,
he's right.
He said, I watched Black Hawk Down the other day and it's great.
Oh, it is. It is.
It is great.
There's very few things I look at of my own effort where I look back at it and go, that's a decent drawing. There's some good stuff in that. Most of me looking upon reflection of my work, I hate looking at my work. I just don't like to see my work. But there are moments, per Ridley's experience recently, where you could look back and go, that's not so bad. No,
of course. Now, I've kept you way over, but I've got one more. This is such a great conversation. I'm enjoying this so much. I have to ask you about Star Trek Discovery, because to me, here we're no longer in an alternate universe. This is supposed to take place before the original series. When did you come on board Discovery? Did you come on board Discovery when Brian Fuller was still running the show? Yeah, and Nicholas Meyer was there? Mm-hmm. Because they had very different, not supposed to tell anybody this, but I may have all of the outlines of the original concept of the show. I might. And I might have
too.
Yeah, and like the idea of the Ephraim, the tardigrade engineer of the Discovery that I quite enjoyed, or the fact that there was no spore drive. They were terraforming. There's a lot of things that were very different.
Yep.
So I'm very curious, and as I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I'm very curious as to the transition and like if you look at what was being designed, the costumes, the phasers in that original iteration, it was very much close. It was very close to the original series, the color palettes, even the design of the Discovery herself. When they showed you the first teaser trailer that was made, that design came from Ralph McQuarrie. That was Ralph McQuarrie and Ken Adam from Star Trek Planet of the Titans, the Star Trek movie that wasn't made in the 70s. Now, so I'm just saying, like, there was all this, and I was really excited about all this stuff. I'm like, whoo. So what happened? Well, I mean, you don't have to tell me anything about, I know, let's just say that, so there was one vision of the show, and that vision ended for whatever reason.
Sort of ended, but the legacy established.
The legacy is, but then how do you go from a tardigrade engineering officer to a weird magical tardigrade that lives in the mycellular network that's suddenly a spaceship. I mean, like, for you, who's somebody who is, and this is what I really want to ask you this whole interview, for you who deals with reality, and for somebody who built a dinosaur out of turkey bones, and you want to know the reality of things.
Yeah.
And I think a tardigrade crew member was a great idea. Because truly alien, it can survive in all these, like a really great idea. That was awesome. And to see a tardigrade creature that was going to work in engineering, I'm all down with that. But how do you go from, and why you'd have to even touch warp drive at all? You know, you don't have to, it's already, that's a Star Trek thing. And then someone's like, what, did they watch Dune? And suddenly the tardigrades look like, you know, the third stage guild navigators from David Lynch's Dune. So now we're going to have a mycellular network, a mushroom network that we're going to travel around in space. Like, how did that happen? And that's that's the thing that I don't understand. And I think for somebody who has loved science fiction movies and I just don't understand how, because it was very difficult to watch that show. And they changed the Klingons. I understand, because Brian Fuller wanted why not look more into the Klingon culture, and if there's different houses, we know that there's and the Klingon sarcophagus ship, and the design got pretty wacky. I mean, even the Discovery's design went from one thing to another. Mm-hmm. So, and you were there.
I was there very early on. I think Brian Fuller may have been on it a few months prior to me. And then Alex Kurtzman brought me on because of my experience and knowledge of...
Because you had worked on 2 films he'd written, the Star Trek movies that he co-wrote with Bob Orci.
Yep, and I worked on all 3 of the features.
Yeah, you worked on Beyond as well.
So, and I had good experiences of hanging out with Orci and Kurtzman.
Bob Orci was a really nice guy.
Yeah, he was sweet as can be. Heartbreaking. So when I came on board, it was sort of at the pinnacle of my relationship with Glenn Hetrick, having worked with him on Face Off.
Right.
And
the series, not the John Woo movie.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Got to be very clear about that. So my hope was that maybe Glenn and I can get more of the production by being able to design whatever creatures that they have, but designing them for makeups. And of course, Glenn with Alchemy was obviously keen on that. Who wouldn't be? So when I came in with Brian, and he was the first person that I spoke with, other than Alex Kurtzman, Brian showed me all the stuff. And it was the sarcophagus ship, and he talked about how, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of it. He says, what if the Klingons, there was a group of them that were sophisticated and enjoyed a brandy and a cigar and had a smoking room and a library, and there was mahogany and all this stuff. And I saw this one image which was based on Islamic architecture, which became an inspiration for the sarcophagus ship, if I'm not mistaken. And I saw that, and he mentioned, what if instead of the classic Klingon attire, they were more samurai warrior, more armor, etc., because we have this torchbearer character moment, and I want it to be ceremonial. And so he's saying all the buzzwords that are getting me very excited, because I thought, much like something I ran into on the previous Star Trek features, was when you're designing a Vulcan, for example, and designing Spock is one thing, forget about that, but designing other Vulcans, and you suddenly, when you start to change things, such as hairstyle, you realize, I can't change hairstyle because that's the iconography. But that makes no sense, that there's one barber, one hairstyle,
Well,
in all space and time.
I mean, it's interesting. Like you go back to the first time you saw other Vulcans in the original series. I think they did that to make it like same with Next Generation. The clothes for like the Romulans with the high shoulders was to easily delineate. There were two reasons: production. These are the costumes. You don't have to change them every time you see somebody, and then we can easily delineate for the viewers what culture they are.
Exactly.
So quickly.
Yep. And I understand that. But that doesn't work if you're a designer like me who tries to problem solve and you're thinking in terms of culture. It's like we can do pointy ears and we can have eyebrows be of that particular shape. And maybe
those are genetic.
Yes, those are genetic. But the hairstyle and the clothing is not genetic.
No.
And so... But you realize in drawing form, when you deviate, and I did this intentionally on Picard when we were doing some of the Romulans, I was doing all sorts of hairstyles, long hair, bangs, there's all sorts of things. And every single time it was not a Bob, it was not a Vulcan or a Romulan. And it was like, damn, this is paradoxical here because we want to do something different. But I know that audiences, as soon as you start messing with hair, and this was true of the Klingons, I can guarantee you, because I've seen the artwork, because I've done the artwork.
Yeah.
You put Klingon hair on some of the versions of our Klingons, and they are Klingon. You take all that hair off, and all of a sudden it's not. And it's the same thing if you knew me back in the 70s with long hair, and then you see me now, it's like, well, you're not Neville. Because the Neville I know, the iconography is that particular hairstyle. Fabio, shaved head. You're not going to know who that is.
Right.
So that was a concern going into Discovery, is knowing how far we were going to push the Klingons in particular in terms of their morphology. Where I wasn't concerned, and I welcomed any kind of pushback from fans, because I felt it was justifiable, is if they look at the Torchbearer, they look at the cultured Klingons, and they're like, the Klingons never wore that. It's like, no. In the same way that a Japanese samurai back then doesn't look the same as a Mongolian today in a city. So anything goes, and that's where I took advantage of the opportunity for the Torchbearer in particular, to try and come up with something that made sense. And I still believe it's one of my best designs I've done for Star Trek, not just in form. That was a case of how much time I had and the resources to create that. But in terms of adding embellishments and flourishes that were not personal and superfluous, they were all connected to the narrative of what the scripts had laid out.
And now, are you talking about the Brian Fuller's first scripts?
I'm like talking about forget anyone's script, Klingon.
Oh, I get it.
History, etc.
Well, one of the things that people don't understand is the only Klingons we've really seen in Star Trek are those that work for the Klingon Navy.
Correct.
You know, we haven't seen. I mean, there was Next Generation episodes like Sins of the Father where we went to Kronos and we did see the civilian Klingons, but because of production, they kept them looking the same, which really doesn't make much sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So in production,
yeah. So in Star Trek, we never really saw. So I don't have a problem. That was. What I thought was really weird was when we saw Discovery, the Klingons were completely redesigned in terms of having different prosthetics, and they were much more alien. Sorry, yeah. They were much more alien looking, and the designs, the makeup, it was hard to understand. The Klingons couldn't talk. The actors couldn't enunciate their words. And that, to me, I thought was a mistake in production that should have been alleviated, because if an actor can't, you know, the whole thing about Klingon, and they made, obviously, from the original series to the motion picture, there was a huge change in Klingon morphology and Klingon design because they had the money where they could do design work, and it wasn't just a guy in dark, stage makeup. And
Yeah.
and that was cool when they did that. And that design, I mean, even the motion picture went a little further than they did on the Next Generation TV series. But Discovery made when it was made, the series was made, those first 2 episodes was pretty shocking when it came to
me as well.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about that.
Pardon me?
Tell me more about that, because since I have you here, I'm just fascinated because as a lifelong Star Trek fan, the design of all of this is something that it's part of what was appealing about the show. The costumes all had this evolution that you could look at and pinpoint, and all of that kind of has gone out the window since 2017. And it's and I get it. I mean, I understand, but when it's supposed to stick, you're supposed to believe that this is a precursor to the original series. How does this? It's very difficult to, because the history should be immutable. Like, they don't change the Millennium Falcon. Star Wars has been around for a long time, but with Star Trek, it's like, wait a minute, we can read it. But no, you can't. Star Trek's history, man. It's real.
And how much do you need to change the design? The fans aren't requiring, talking about, craving, telling us, could you redesign the ship again for us? No, what they want, I care only about the story. I care about the characters. And,
right.
And they could be wearing the same costumes that they were in the 60s. And, some of that success, is it fan service? Is it a pivot because people are complaining? There might be, it's wise to pay attention to your fan base. But I think it's also important that I often say to people, if you don't like something, and I'm not talking about Star Trek right now.
Right, just in general.
A particular thing, just don't watch it. Yeah, but it's my Star Wars, Star Trek, it's like, it's not yours, actually. I understand that.
Oh, no. It is.
I know. But the people that are making it, there's hundreds of people that are trying to get this thing seen. And anyone who's ever attempted to make a movie recognizes that it's a Herculean effort. So, yeah, I'm a little more harsh that way, where I will say, it's not yours. You can go see it or not. But Star Trek is yours. The reason that Star Trek exists today is because the fans exist still, and because the fans are the ones that rounded out the canon and the lore and the history.
Right, with the backgrounders and all the people that did their own blueprints, yeah.
Precisely. So when I step into the world of Klingons, what I am looking at, is the history of the art of the shows, but I'm looking at the fan stuff that they have created in their additional literature, artwork, etc., that informs, absolutely tells us what the next evolution should be. So we did drift away from the original concept that we had. And it's kind of like the game of telephone. I think this is the easiest, safest, simplest answer. When you think of the game of telephone, and it starts off with, say, Kurtzman or Brian Fuller or whomever at the beginning, Neville, this is what we want. Got it. And I start doing my thing. By virtue of translating, interpreting, and more importantly, what people don't see behind the scenes is we don't have that much time or that much money, believe it or not.
Right.
So whatever decisions you're making, make them now. And you might even have to make them without our input. So make sure they're damn good decisions.
Yeah.
And then I hand over my thing, and that gets a version of telephone interpretation. And then it keeps going. And then I'm popping corn, and I got my bevy, and I'm turning on the TV, excited to see the first episode. And I'm like, what happened? Oh my goodness. And I it would be, I know it's dangerous in a way for me to say, but at the same time, if the powers that be on Star Trek see this interview and are like, Neville, you've said too much, you've spoken too much of your truth, and we don't appreciate it. then you know what? Then I guess I won't work again on Star Trek. But
well, I'll just tell you, I'm holding my tongue, and
I know you are.
My normal go-to position, because I've talked a lot about this in my life, is because I have great respect for you. So but it's also, I am curious. In all honesty, I'm just curious as to how decisions are made, because it has been interesting to see how Star Trek has been treated throughout the years. And it's there are very few TV shows that have tried to create, or very few entertainment IPs at all that have tried to create a history. I mean, Star Trek has an internal in-universe history that spans hundreds of years now. And it's an amazing feat of imagination, really. And to see all the different eras of time that have been represented, and so unlike other concerns, Star Trek is an interesting one. And I found, like, even the show itself, what it's about, the stories it tells, was really about America bringing the Constitution to space. If you think about it, the original conceit with John F. Kennedy and the Camelot White House, and that whole promise of what America was going to be with the space race and the optimistic future. If we could do that, that's how Star Trek really began, made by people that all fought in World War II and came out of the greatest generation. And nowadays, that doesn't exist. Nowadays, there's a lot of people that don't even believe in America. We're just call it what you want. And I think the underlying concepts behind Star Trek are no longer even believed in by the people that are making Star Trek, just because it's a function of where we are socio-politically. But to me, it's an interesting thing, and call it the Kurtzman era, the secret hideout era of Star Trek, is a very different era of Star Trek than existed from 1966 to 2005.
It is. Yeah, it is. And honestly, I can't speak to that, because it's not above my pay grade. It's lateral to my pay grade.
Yeah, of course.
And
I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything. I'm just curious, because
I've read it, not all, but I've read a lot of the points of view and the criticism and the praise. And I've also recognized, again, where history gives us, it's an opportunity to now understand how we got where we got and how to navigate it differently. And I'd say the biggest reason the TV shows turned out the way they did, and I'm not going to say they turned out crappy or they turned out exceptional.
Nor would I expect you to.
The reason they turned out the way they did was the fact that TV is a complicated machine. It's a very complicated machine. And maybe that's the difference, because I pay attention to it from a whole different point of view. And that is, well, Neville, don't you aspire to create episodic serial content? So if you do, pay attention to the successes and the failures, which every production has, of course. And so I've paid attention to it. And one of the things that was a challenge at the beginning of it was it was a scramble at the start. There was limited time, but a fixed day of when things were going to be filmed.
Yes, and you like with the motion picture, you had to kind of change things in midstream pretty drastically. I mean, the outline that was created for those first original 13 episodes is pretty different than what wound up on. I mean, the vague structure is kind of there, but the details are very different.
I think a perfect example of a problem, which really worked out well for me, was the torchbearer design. And it's a long story, but the simple version, or the simple truncated story of that, was there's a shoot day, and there's the day when we are going to start the design. And it keeps getting compressed because of all the things that happen with productions. That's normal. And it got to the point where, when I was finally given sort of the green light to do it, I said to them, you don't have to use me. You can go somewhere else. but just know that the situation is going to be the same. And that is because there's this amount of time now, you no longer have the opportunity to be involved with the design and have opinions about it. The only thing that can happen now is execution. That's all. So that meant I had to be given complete autonomy and carte blanche to do what I felt was right. Not do what Neville wants to do.
Right.
To really pay attention to all the things that were part of the narrative. And like I told them, I said, what I will do, though, is I will send you a component a day. And you're going to have to imagine how it all goes together at the end, because I'm going to send you a shoe, the top of a shoe, Friday. And on Monday, I'll send you maybe a shin. Next Wednesday, it's going to be a calf. And then I'm working my way up. You're going to get to knees, a thigh piece, and you're going to be wondering, what the hell is this thing going to look like?
But you know what you did with the torchbearer, that was a new concept. You know,
Yes.
a new idea for the Klingons that I thought was a very valid, a very cool concept.
Which is why I was able to do that.
Yeah, but it's really cool, and I don't think that it. I think it was a logical extension of something that you could believe that we just hadn't seen before, because, you know, in Star Trek we haven't seen a lot of these cultures. We've only seen, it'd be like basing, if all you knew about if you lived in Europe and all you knew about Americans were what you saw when the Navy pulled in, you know, when the Fifth Fleet docked, and all you met were people off those ships, and thinks, well, those are all, that's what Americans are. That's kind of how the alien races have worked in Star Trek. We haven't seen very many religious people. We haven't seen very many, you know, gurus or spiritual people. I mean, you'll get a Cybok for a movie maybe, but we haven't seen all of those things. So if it's well thought through, like the thing that you do that I really have liked about your designs, and one of the things I wanted to talk to you about that was so exciting for me, is that, like you said, you think about form and function. Like how is this going to work? Like, if it's going to exist, if this is an alien life form on Pandora, you have to believe it. And the audience, like, you can't, you know, that was something that CG was able to give people. You could do anything you want, but it didn't make it believable. Like, if you're going to do some giant monster that is moving in a way that I don't believe, it doesn't work, you know, and the audience knows that. They might not know why, but they can feel it. There's something wrong.
The audience doesn't have to know why. They just have to feel that it is wrong or feel that it is right. It's our job to kind of know the whys. Because you also have to know how to fix it if it's not working in a daily or something.
Right.
But yeah, I think we could spend another 2 hours just on this topic.
Oh, I know we can.
If you want to, because I do have to leave pretty darn soon.
I was going to say, I can't believe I've kept you for 2 hours. I'm sorry.
That is okay. If you want to do another, I'd be happy to pick this up, pick a time and so on, and we can do a round 2 if you want.
I'd love to have you live on my show so people could call. I do a live YouTube show that people can ask you questions, because I think it'd be great. I did when Star Trek Picard season 3 came out. I interviewed everybody, the actors, and Terry Matalas, the showrunner at the time, and we did 15 episodes. And Dave Blast, the production designer on season 3, and we had the shows were great. So,
well, I was very, very involved with Picard, in so many ways, and some of it comes back to our earlier conversations about establishing a precedent in JJ's films in terms of how we work efficiently on something, and then being able to pose that to Kurtzman and say, you know, it worked on Discovery. Let's take that. You know, it didn't work on Discovery. Let's never do that again. And now let's apply all the best to Picard.
Yeah.
And that meant me working privately with Amanda Plummer. It meant me working privately with any cast member that's going to have, you know, rubber glued to their face.
Right.
Because it needed to be.
Amanda Plummer was great, by the way.
Yeah. She's totally unique human being and a real delight.
Yeah.
But again, if you wanted to do a follow-up on this.
Oh, I'd love to. Well, listen, I will let you go. I know you have to go. Neville Page, I want to thank you for being here on the Designing Hollywood show. Before I let you go, is there any advice you can give to young people who want to follow in your footsteps, who want to be a designer, and any wise pearls you could offer anyone?
There are many pearls, but ironically, the problem is the state of where we are in the film business today forbids me from saying to anyone, hey, if you want to work in film, let me convey to you the skills needed, etc. I can give it to you conceptually, but the dust has not settled on Hollywood.
No.
The dust has not settled on where AI is taking us. But what I hear enough from young aspiring people compels me to just speak a tiny bit about AI and its impact on the aspiring designer. And I say this with a lot of effort put into understanding AI and conversations with people who are using it, conversations with people that see it as the devil. AI, as far as I can tell, is here to stay. It is inevitable.
Yes.
And unavoidable. And what needs to happen is we need to have a relationship with it that is healthy. And the concern that a lot of artists, young artists, aspiring film designers have, who are in school right now, learning skills today that may appear to be of absolutely no use and value in a few months. That's very scary stuff for parents as well, who are spending the money on this education. Here's the good news. At the helm of AI currently are artists, are human beings. Yes, prompting. Yes, things are being done with tremendous efficiency and ease in a lot of ways. But if you're a person who's using Photoshop and using ZBrush, you also have to understand that you're using tools that a traditional sculptor or traditional painter had to make that transition. Now, the issue with AI that I think most people tend to bump against is the ethics of it. Absolutely, that's a serious thing. And there are now things in motion to deal with the ethics of it, not just the ethics of how things have been scraped and taken without consent, but also just the consumption of energy to keep these AI farms doing what they do. There's a whole lot out there. Like I said, the dust has not settled yet. The most important thing that we need to do, all of us, and this isn't just for AI, but you can extrapolate out of this however you want as it applies to other things. To look away, to ignore, to hate it, to be ignorant to it, is a disservice to yourself. Anytime we find something uncomfortable that we don't understand, can be religion, can be sexual propensities, it can be politics. When we don't understand it, it annoys us, we look away, and it turns into a non-conversation. And we're so divided on every freaking topic, it seems, that my hope is that we look at it directly in its eyes, AI, etc., and we understand it. Doesn't mean you got to use it, and it does not mean you have to like it. I'm on the fence. I love AI. I think it's incredible, and I despise it. I think it's awful. So I'm reconciling that for myself. What do I love about it? There's some pretty incredible things that a good artist with good taste and good history and good life experience can help shepherd it into the world. And then there are the things that concern me, is the atrophy that it can cause for the creative inspiration of things. It's easy to be a lazy prompter and get stuff that's good enough that a person who's not an artist will be like, that's amazing, it's shiny and fully rendered. And there's a real danger of a lot of garbage being produced. And it will happen, and it is happening. But I do believe that currently, and this can change, but currently we're not doomed as artists. I think that there's a lot being spoken about in every capacity of life, that it's reactionary, it's not vetted, and people are looking at the headlines and reacting and responding to it. When you go deeper, and I've been going deep into AI and trying to, not just like playing with Midjourney, I'm talking about working with companies and talking to people who are leading. I need to know as much as I possibly can to know if I need to be afraid, to know if I'm empowered, and to know how I can be involved with guiding it into areas that facilitate the humanity and the artistic endeavors that we have in creating stuff. I want to be one of the people who's helping shape it for the right reasons. I love my pencils. I love my real clay. That is here to stay as well. But don't fear AI. The moment you fear it, the moment you fear it so much that you ignore it and you're ignorant to what it can do, good and bad, is the moment you've lost control of where you as an artist, you as a storyteller, you as a person who likes to create, once you lose sight of it because of ignorance, just use that parallel, simile, metaphor that we see every single day in politics and religion and points of view. If you're afraid of something and you're not willing to understand that thing, you really don't have the opportunity to have an opinion about it. Once you step into it and you wear the shoes for a little bit, then you can start to have an opinion about it. But it's really difficult to have an opinion, and more importantly, to have a conversation when it's emotional. So just be careful to not be too reactive. This is a very long-winded and, dare I say, repetitive answer.
No, but it's still it's great. You know, you worked on Tron Legacy. I made a feature-length documentary on the making of the original Tron. And I was interviewing Steven Lisberger, and he says in the documentary that in this new technology, any new technology, it's very important that you get artists involved with it as soon as possible.
Yes. That an artist, I was just doing a class recently, and this is one of the things that I was talking about with these, dare I say, students. And that is, when you're looking at art, whether it be a painting in a museum, a sculpture done in ZBrush on ZBrush Central, whatever it is, ArtStation, when you're looking at art, you are looking at art. You are not wondering to yourself, do you think the person that did that design is transgender, or likes Trump, or likes Biden, or is a Christian, or is a Jew? No, you're looking at the art. And there will be Jews that have made that art, Muslims that made that art, transgender people that have made that art. My point being is that art is the bridge for us to get along. Now, you can dislike a piece of art and you can have a conversation about it, but usually it tends to not be so emotional. You can have a strong opinion about a TV show, and I get that. But art tends to be this beautiful unifier that we all love nice looking things. We all love to hear good stories, whether they're scary or love stories, whatever it is. So what is it that's unique about an artist other than that the medium itself is a bridge and a unifier? For an artist to be great at what they do, for a designer to be great at what they do, you must be a critical thinker. You have to pay attention to the subject that you're dealing with. You have to understand it intimately before you can alter it, change it, bend the rules, break the rules. And if you don't have those skills, then to me, you're not really a good designer. You're not evolving the subject matter. So what an artist does bring is this unique way of approaching things. And artists tend to be more empathetic. Not a bad word, nor is woke in my opinion, but those of us who have empathy, those of us who are artists, tend to have empathy because we pay attention and we are critical thinkers and we observe and we feel like we need to know, why does yellow and blue make green? Why is the sky blue? There are things we just need to know to be able to then execute. I think artists' conceit and point of view and philosophies are something that the world, like you just said, if art can get there first and deal with it, the reason why that's a positive point of view is because we're going to be objective. We had better be. We're going to be doing the homework to understand the subject matter. And that is what I think is missing in the world at the moment, is people taking pause to be empathetic and to understand stuff, and apply that to whatever you want to apply it to. Apply it to your art, mostly.
I couldn't agree with you more. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go. This has been an amazing 2-hour plus conversation with Neville Page. Neville, first of all, thank you for giving us so much of your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for appearing here on the Designing Hollywood show.
Thank you.
A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.